hello. Welcome to Beyond Belief Sobriety. If you are new to our YouTube channel and just finding us for the first time, Beyond Belief Sobriety is a podcast that focuses on issues of interest to people who are seeking or who have found a secular path to recovery from addictions of all kinds. And today I'm going to be speaking with Mark Holmes. Mark is the author of Holmes Complete Guide to Stop Drinking Alcohol, the easy, mindful, and pain-free way. He is also the CEO of the Addiction Help Agency, located in London, England. I really look forward to speaking with him and learning about how he came to where he's at today and what he's doing to help people who are suffering from addiction to alcohol. Welcome, Mark, to Beyond Belief Sobriety. It's so nice to have you here.
Oh, it's great to be here. Um, it's a pleasure.
Good. Well, I like to start just to get to know you a little bit. If you wouldn't mind giving us a little bit of background about your relationship with alcohol and how you got to where you eventually wrote this book and got involved with the agency.
Yeah, sure. Well, um, first of all, I suppose I've got to put my hands up and say I was quite a long career in drinking as an alcoholic. I think it was about 30 years. So it started pretty late in my sort of late teenage years. Um, so I wasn't a sort of a young teenage drinker, an adolescent drinker. I sort of had my first drink at the legal age in England, which is 18. Um, and I write about it in the book because I refer to it and say, um, my first sip of the beer was was weird, and I kind of didn't really know what it was meant to taste like that because it tasted so bad. And it was confusing to me. And I actually asked my friends to, can you check that it tastes
Yeah.
right, because I don't think this can't be what I've been watching on TV and in the commercials. Um, this can't be the same stuff. They must have made a mistake. So, um, I think it's inevitable, in fact, that people end up trying alcohol at the legal age or not.
Mhm.
Even before that. I mean, you made a very interesting point in a podcast a few podcasts ago about uh, drinking being in a kind of adolescent disease. I think you called it,
Yeah, yeah.
which
Addicted
was
to the adolescence.
fascinating.
Hmm.
You know, because I can sort of relate to that. Because although I sort of had my first drink in a pub at 18, after that, um, I kind of found I was kind of leaning on it a bit as a crutch, I
Yeah.
think, and that kind of increased. Um, and and so I can very much relate to that sort of that expression. I follow in my book. I follow through the stages of my career, my drinking career, from sort of I call it the morning of my life, from sort of naught to 24,
Mm.
so up through the years of university, and I found some quite surprising research, in fact, on why people drink at university and college, um, and it's very much for kind of a positive emotional reason. They want
Hmm.
to gain a positive effect, and there's a lot of peer pressure, a lot of social influences at play,
So is it
and I
drinking
found that fascinating.
to socialize you to get into to make friends and
Yes.
yeah. Hmm.
Sorry, John. Yeah, absolutely right. It's to fit in.
Right.
Um, isn't it strange? Isn't it? It's strange that that to fit in, to be normal, I've got to drink this poison stuff. I find it bizarre, but this is very common. And in fact, the research that was done at a British university um, was looking at the fact that people, what excuses did people have to give for not drinking,
Yeah.
because it was such an accepted part of the expectation that you're not going to have friends if you don't drink.
It's still that way
um
as an adult sometimes. I had an experience at work not that long ago, a few years ago, where I was at a work function where people were drinking. And there was one particular guy who happened to be my boss at the time who was just shocked and annoyed that I wasn't drinking. why
It's
in the hell
unbelievable.
was I not drinking alcohol? And so
You are a bit strange, John. I'm sorry, mate. I mean, I love your show, but no, but seriously, yeah. I mean, it's amazing.
yeah.
Um, but the research was showing that people who actually had a positive self-esteem were less inclined to be lonely at their end of their first year of college.
Hmm.
And that was a much better indicator of making friends. And
So the people with good self-esteem didn't necessarily need to rely on alcohol to socialize and make friends.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, that's the basic idea. So it's so when I was thinking about my time at uni, um, that was one of my key things. I think was to be part of the crowd,
Hmm.
and I talk about that in the book about going on these pub crawls. I don't know,
Yeah.
Missouri, John.
Yeah. We have pub
Where
crawls here. I don't know if they don't call them pubs,
it's
but we have a wagon where people pedal around from one place to the next to drink.
oh right, right. We don't have that, but it sounds pretty much the same thing. But I write about that because it was a bizarre notion, and in
Hmm.
fact, about the time I was at university, the government brought the drinking age. Sorry, not the drinking age. Hours. They increased the opening hours during the day. So it's
Oh,
possible for students of my age to an era. I was sort of mid X generation X. It was possible for us to go drinking in the afternoon, which again, it beggars belief. Why would the government want to do that?
mm,
But anyway, this was very much part of my university culture. So it became something that I would lean on as a crutch. If I was feeling lonely, and it was something that I'd also use to sort of try and enhance my mood, and be more of the life and soul of the party. I guess you could say at uni, and to fit
yeah.
in and be accepted. Um, and isn't that? And I mean, looking back on that, it was a bit scary to think how easily um, yeah, I kind of accepted this kind of enculturation, if you like. This is
Right.
the way it's done. I don't know any
Right.
better. Um,
Right.
and so then we go from a situation, so that I call that the morning of my life, from 0 to 24. Then I'm going into my professional life, then, John, from 25 up until my 40s. And in my professional life, then it becomes a totally different habit. And what interested me is that these sort of different stages of your life, if you separate them by, sort of, don't they say in the Bible, 3 score and 10? I know this is
Right. It's okay. You
not
can
a
talk
religious
about. You
broadcast,
can make biblical references. We won't be offended.
but 24. I use the kind of every 24 years there's a
Mm,
phase of your life, and the reasons why you drink are different in those different phases. That's what I was kind of
yeah.
curious to kind of observe, at least for my life. And so in my professional life, there were different reasons for drinking. And in fact, the research supports that you're not really doing it as much for peer or social pressure, but you're doing it more to relieve a negative emotional state.
Yeah.
So,
That makes sense. From my own personal
does it make
experience, that
sense?
makes
Yeah.
sense. It does. Hmm.
So, if you've got stress at work, I mean, if you remember when I left college, and I'm right about this in the book as well, is I was under enormous financial pressure, with
Right.
student loans. I didn't get any, I came from a sort of, I won't say poor, but kind of lower
Right.
working class background, quite normal, nothing special. And I had to pay my own way through school, and always, supported myself in that respect. So I was doing bar jobs. In fact, I was doing
Yeah.
bar jobs before it was legal to drink. Um, but I don't think that is too relevant, because I don't think that had an influence on me
Hmm.
drinking at 18. I think that was more just the way society was where I
Right.
was in London.
Right.
Um, but yeah, so anyway, so I'm saying as a professional, I trained as a teacher,
Oh.
and a teacher of business studies. That was
Oh.
school teacher, lecturer. So I was, teaching mostly college age kids,
Hmm.
um, a variety of business courses. And yeah, I found the pressure there when I started my career. I wasn't earning very much money, and I'm sure
Right.
that's pretty much the same around the world. So you've got these huge debts, on
Yeah.
one side. You haven't got much money coming in the other side. You're still young enough to think, you that that in a way that you have to treat all these things, I suppose, with a sort of a great deal of respect and earnestness and conscientiousness. And I'm not saying any of those things are wrong.
Right.
Um, but what I'm saying is, um, you really have a limited life school set, and that's really not. I'm desperately trying not to be patronizing, but it sounds a little bit patronizing, I know. But what I mean is that your life skill set is less when you're in your sort of 20s than it is
Right.
in your 30s, than it is in your 40s.
Right. In fact,
So
you're in your early 20s, your brain is still kind of developing, isn't it?
well, that's correct. Yeah, that's a very good point. There's neural plasticity up until 25.
Mm-hmm.
So your brain is still growing.
Yeah.
So, if I was drinking from 18 to 25 in that morning of my life, um, that's doing incredible damage.
Yeah.
Um, and I mean, I think I've had some sort of, definitely I've had some sort of brain damage from 30 years of drinking. I think that
Mm-hmm.
that hopefully, um, I don't know. I think I'm jumping ahead of the game there,
That's all right.
but I think that getting to the punchline.
Yeah.
But I definitely think. I mean, the if, the consequences of drinking alcohol are so severe,
Yeah, they
and
are.
you don't realize happening, do you? Over time, and what those effects can be. And a various range of sort of emotional um, outpourings, outbursts. But I'm happy to talk about that um, down the path, or if you want to, I can expand on that. But definitely, your alcohol does affect the structure of your brain and your thinking, your emotions. Um, and I think that's very relevant, even that's afternoon of my life in my professional years, um, because it's having an influence um, outside of when you're actually drinking. So
Mm-hmm.
you kind of have the idea when well, I had the idea when I was younger that, basically I'm working hard, playing hard, John. That's what I'm doing. I'm,
Right.
really working hard in the college. Then I'm going to get wasted and party like, it was the 90s, and, party like it's 1999. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it seemed to be really the cool thing to do.
Yep.
And yes, I'm kind of making a sort of musical reference, cultural reference to the times, because I think that's you can't see anything without context. And I think we should all think about our drinking stories in the context that they happen. um,
Yeah.
and the time period and the influences around us and the socialization and the working conditions and our emotional, family, personal
Yeah.
lives. So it doesn't all happen. Nothing happens in isolation. It's not just drinking.
Sure.
Um, I think that's important. Um, so yeah, for me, what you find is that you have different effects happening. Um, and I relate this in my book to the idea of the tide coming in and out. Because when I was working in my first college, I was working by the sea in Weston-super-Mare,
Mm-hmm.
um, and I see the analogy of in the evening the tide's coming in. I'm in the pub, I'm drinking, and then overnight the tide goes out, and in the morning I'm parched, dry as the sand.
Mm-hmm.
um and I'm oh, it's not a good mood.
Right.
I'm even more stressed. I don't know why I'm more stressed. I know why I'm more stressed, because I've got no orange juice or yogurt drink or
Yep.
whatever else I use as my technique for solving the evening's problem of the night before.
Mm-hmm.
um and I've got all these strategies in my head. So what's happening is gradually this tide is coming in and coming out and coming in and coming out, without me realizing that I'm moving from an occasional drinker at college, at the events, at the
Right.
clubs, at the parties, now to becoming a habitual drinker.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the kind of process that my life is kind of going through,
Mm-hmm.
if that makes sense.
Makes perfect
Uh,
sense.
and so before I know it, I'm now rationalizing, John, why that is necessary, because I'm not an idiot, am I? Come on,
Hmm.
I'm very smart. I've
Right.
done my degree. I'm a professor in a college, so I
Hmm.
must be pretty clever. So there must be a good rational reason for what I'm doing, and obviously there's not.
Yeah.
There's not at all. There's no rational reason for drinking alcohol. There's no rational reason to kind of slowly kill yourself.
Yeah. You point out it
Um,
is a poison.
well, it absolutely is a poison. I mean, I consider myself a former ethanol drinker. I don't
Yeah.
say I'm an alcoholic.
Hmm.
I call it what it is.
Yeah.
It's ethanol.
Yeah.
And I go into the book about what's the chemical formulation for this, and it's and how much of it can kill you.
Yeah.
Um, so it's not the what you see in the commercials.
No. You
It's
mentioned the example of
yeah,
Amy Winehouse,
yes,
and her death was completely alcohol related.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, this the shocking thing is the level of the alcohol content in her blood. The blood alcohol content is something that we commonly know it from measuring the alcohol in our blood if we're
Right.
having a breathalyzer.
Right.
But there's I've put charts in the book where you can see what will be the blood alcohol concentrations compared to the different number of drinks you have. So the chart will show you, if you have one or two drinks, this will be your blood alcohol concentration, and if you have 10 drinks, this will be your blood alcohol concentration, and then it will have certain physiological effects.
Hmm.
So for each level of drinking, each level of blood alcohol content, then you'll have a different physiological effect, including at the extreme end, death,
Death.
possible death. And this is not me making it up.
Right.
I say at the beginning of the book, there's no point in me telling you, the scare stories,
No.
um, because we all know it's going to do our liver in. We all know, we all know those kind of, possibly get cancer,
Hmm.
all these things. So I wasn't doing it for that purpose. What I was doing it for was to try and indicate that when you have this substance, it's going to have a certain physiological, and that will have effects on neurologically, emotionally, and behaviorally. So I mean, I find that quite interesting, because your behavior is to be different when you've had a few drinks, and
Yeah.
research has actually proven that.
Yeah.
Well, we all know it, but to see research that proves that we actually lose our inhibitions. And it's fascinating when people say, oh yeah, but I want to really lose my inhibitions. I really want,
You're
I
right.
hate not having any inhibitions, right?
Uh
I
huh.
could just do anything I want. But actually, that is, an indication
That's
of
not a good
of
idea,
of
is it?
sort of mental illness, right?
Yeah.
Is having no inhibitions.
Right.
Having
Right. It's not a good
inhibitory
idea.
control is essential for adult functioning in human life
Right.
as we know it, right?
Inhibitions might be healthy.
They are very healthy, right? You can't
Yeah.
do without them. You won't succeed.
Right.
You won't be able to tolerate, doing
Makes
something you don't enjoy
sense.
doing for 5 minutes without it.
Sure.
So the fact of removing inhibitions, I mean, in fact, that's one of the characteristics of ADHD.
Hmm.
And we've got some kids on drugs. As a teacher, I mean, this is very concerning,
Yeah.
because of that condition, not being able to control your inhibitions, and yet somehow the irony is that people kind of twist. I think when you're an alcoholic, um, anything is twisted in your rationale to make sense of it, because you can't. You whatever
Right.
you have to make sense of it, because you're
Hmm.
not an addict, are you?
Right.
I'm not an addict. How can I be an addict?
Yeah.
I've got a successful career.
Yeah.
So moving on with the story. Sorry, I keep getting distracted on my little tangents, but in my 30s, I was doing very well. I rose up to head of department, um, and then assistant principal, um, and the curriculum manager. So I mean, I was doing very well in my career for 10 years. Um, and then I went overseas, and I led schools in Southeast Asia, in in Spain, in Latin America. So I had a very successful international leadership career in education. Um, and at the time, I thought it was perfectly rational and perfectly reasonable, to work all the hours God gave,
Mm-hmm.
um, uh, and then relax hard
Yeah.
with my whatever my chosen
Mm-hmm.
uh, poison of choice was that day. So it could have been
Right.
wine, it could have been beer, it
Yeah.
could have been whiskey, it could have been whiskey and beer, it could have been cider. The combinations were, it was almost an art form. In fact,
Mm-hmm.
of it became, of because obviously as you become more successful, you become, more able to afford drink.
Right.
And so, your income, then you're okay. I'll have a more expensive bottle of wine, or uh, can you have a more expensive? You can actually have more expensive beer. Yeah, you can actually buy this really. I'm
Nowadays they
saying,
really have
I
expensive
was
beer.
thinking, can you do that? Can you buy expensive? Yes, you can.
They have
I
some
think
fancy
I
beers now.
did.
Yeah.
And you got champagne, and the funny thing is that everyone thinks. Well, not everyone. I don't know. I'm sorry. I'm generalizing there, but
Mm-hmm.
I do suspect that perhaps people have kind of this illusion uh, that people who are alcoholics, aren't very successful,
Right.
and they've got this kind of very stereotypical view of the drunk in the gutter.
Mm-hmm. It's amazing
Where
that that
you know what I
stereotype
mean?
is carried on all these years. I mean, we still have not dispensed of that stereotype.
And it's totally wrong. The
It is.
people that are alcoholics are very successful,
Yeah.
tend to be middle aged, and they're very strong. People think they're weak willed. They're very strong willed. They
Yeah.
wouldn't be successful if they were weak willed. These people have got strong willpower. Otherwise, they wouldn't be successful in their career. Tend to be higher income earners. We look at income profiles. We look at demographic profiles in the book,
Mm-hmm.
um, and it's fascinating that this stereotypes are wrong.
Yeah. It's interesting
And
about the willpower too. Think about how much willpower it takes just to be an addict and get through your life.
yeah,
It takes a tremendous amount of willpower to do that. So, yeah.
no, you're absolutely right. Yeah, there's no problem with willpower.
Mm-mm.
If you're the problem is, I tell you what, the problem is understanding the way we think about drink.
Yeah.
um I John, using willpower, and I'm very, very confident. I've led 100 staff and stood up in front of thousands of um in an audience, and so it's not, I'm not quickly to feel so insecure and shed tears.
Mm-hmm.
But when I was trying to
Right.
quit with willpower, I can tell you I used
Right.
to walk until my legs ached, and I'd come home in literally, in tears pouring down my
Yeah.
face, um, because I was struggling so hard.
Yeah.
Um,
It doesn't work
and
to
why?
stop.
Yeah, go on.
It doesn't
Sorry,
work.
John. Go on.
No, you're right. No, the will, no matter how, I could will myself to drag myself into the office with the worst kind of a hangover. I could go through all kinds of effort to get a drink and all sorts of will. But when it came to stopping, that tremendous amount of will was not any use for me. And I don't, I just think that's the nature of addiction.
Yeah, I think that's true, and it's so sad. And it's when you've actually, well, obviously you know what I'm talking about, and I'm sure many of our listeners here do as well. It's incredibly painful, and it's repeated. and it's like it's a regular. It can be can become. I shouldn't laugh. I'm not laughing. I mean,
Right.
I tried to quit many times, and it was the most painful thing I think I've ever done in my life. You know, people do, what do they do there? You know, October dry month, or they do a January dry month, and then if they do that, they feel, um, you know, that they're on top of it. But anyone who's questioning, are they on top of it, or if anyone's listening to the show today and thinking, am I or not, or am I, or maybe I'm not,
Mm.
or maybe I am. If you're asking yourself that question, I think there's a reason why you're asking the question.
I agree. I've always thought that, and especially when I was looking back at my own that time before I got help, and there would always be those moments when I would question, do I have a problem? Is this really a problem? Is my boss right? Is my brother right? And then I would dismiss those out of my head. But if you can ever just stop and think, wait a second, does someone who doesn't have a problem have to sit and wonder if they have a problem? I
That's
don't think they
exactly
do.
right.
I don't think they do.
I think you're right there. I mean,
So
I put
I
in
guess it doesn't mean that you necessarily have the problem, but if it's necessarily there must be something to look at if you're sitting there pondering whether or not it's a problem. And maybe you need an expert to kind of take a look at it.
you're right. You don't need an awful lot of training to see that one, but it's true. But it's part of this. It's kind of part of this, you know, rationalization in
Yeah,
your head that
yeah,
you're kind of consciously trying to rationalize an insane thing,
right.
and you've got to almost split yourself up from yourself, you know, kind of look down on yourself and say, right, you know, who's doing what they're doing, you know, step outside yourself somehow and see what you're doing. It's really hard, you know. I kind of thought, I saw it. I'm a bit of a Trekkie, John, and I hope people will forgive me that, but I remember an episode of Star Trek where, you know, Captain Kirk was, you know, suddenly become, lost control of, you know, of himself, of who he was, and you know, didn't know he was himself.
Okay.
You know, and he starts slapping himself over the face, and you're like, now you may laugh, right? But I was
Right.
like 14-year-old kid at the time, going, oh my
Uh-huh.
god, you know, this is the worst thing. I mean, you've lost
Uh-huh.
control of yourself,
Uh-huh.
and I can't help thinking that the analogy might be quite apt for my life.
Sure.
You know, did I lose control of who I was? You know, and in all seriousness, you know, that was, I think I did.
Yeah.
I think I couldn't see, you know, see out of my own eyes in a way, and I couldn't see what I was doing, and I had to kind of somehow, you know, sort of jump in and break that kind of, break the loop, break that kind of connection, um, and that's the thing, and it's kind of self-awareness, isn't it? I mean, it's really being honest with yourself, kind of painfully honest, and it happens in different ways from different people. I mean, I talk about the stages of life, you know. And it can
Mm-hmm.
happen, you can realize that, you know, I wish I'd realized it in my 20s, you know, or you can happen in the afternoon of your life, or, you know, for me it was the evening of life. So I think of how many
Is it
years,
possible,
decades.
Mark, to help somebody make that honest assessment of themselves? Is it possible to, or does it just, is this something that just has to happen? Like they say, you must hit bottom, or is this something that maybe someone who is trained with therapy can actually help someone arrive to that conclusion?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, yeah, that basically it's, I mean, that's what worked for me in the end. It was, cognitive behavioral therapy.
Mm,
Um, and it's the kind of, the simple way of putting it really is if you are doing something that is causing you, you know, your life pain and suffering, what is making you do that? There must be something wrong with your thinking. You know, you're thinking wrong. So what the way you're thinking is not rational. So you know, there's the way cognitive behavioral therapy works is that there it's trying to work out what is causing you to think the way you do.
right.
So if you're having any kind of negative automatic thoughts, for example, which I think are very common when people are addicted to alcohol, they can kind of kind of look at things and say, oh, everything's bad, or this is much worse. They exaggerate, magnify things, and the way of thinking, or they have to do everything right. I mean, for me, it was I'm a bit of a perfectionist. I have to turn this school around. I have to ensure these results are
Hmm.
all A to C's of 85%, and but these things, these ways of thinking, um, are not necessarily healthy ways of thinking.
Right.
And John Cleese wrote a book, very good book. I mean, I do there's a lot of references in my book,
Hmm.
and most of them are academic. I'd say 90%, but there's a
Yeah, the
few that
book is very well sourced, isn't it?
oh,
Um,
thank you so
yeah,
much. Well,
yeah.
I
It's
really
a
tried because I thought, people don't really want my opinions, but they might be interested in the opinions of people who've done research, So there's like 300 academic references because
yeah,
I want in their words, their quotes, this is what they said, and you decide,
yeah,
you
yeah.
make
Your
your own mind.
background in education probably is what inspired you to make sure that you had, good sources to back up everything that you had to say.
Yeah,
The science behind what you were writing about.
that's it. I didn't think of that, John, but yeah, I think you're right. I mean, like I've always tried, my as a teacher, you're trying to get what's the kind of clearest way of getting this thing across. What's
Right.
the bring it down to the basics. What is this guy saying? This scientist. And when I was looking at the research, um, I was really I was really lucky in a way. It sounds a bit ironic, but I was lucky because I could say, is this relevant?
Mm,
You wouldn't believe how much research there is. I mean, you could fill, I don't know, New York Library with the amount of
right.
research there is on alcohol. Um, just on alcohol, and
Wow.
there's reams and reams. But what I was able to do is filter it and say, look, would this be applicable in your early years of
Uh-huh.
your teenage years? Would this be applicable in your working life, or when you're in your middle years? Would that be relevant at this stage? And so I kind of had to filter that. I've gone through those things, and could hopefully shed some light on that. Sorry, I think I've gone off on a bit of a long
Oh
tangent
no,
there.
very interesting.
But
So
yeah,
was it
so
through therapy that you realized that you had a problem and needed help? Is that it was it cognitive behavioral therapy that got you to even get to that point?
well, I mean, I thought it was impossible. For me to give up, John. I just thought it's impossible because the pain of the withdrawal makes you think that you're not the pain. Excuse me, I've got to be very careful here. It's not so much the pain of the withdrawal. It's when you try and quit by willpower. The pain of doing that is so intense because you don't know what you really don't understand the thinking process, right? I
Right.
mean, now I can in a very simple, I can really make it simple. There's two reasons basically why people drink, right? You can read the whole book. It's 375 pages and
Hmm.
very good. But I'll tell you now the secret, right? The two things that reason that people drink: one is they want a reward, and
Mm,
two is they want a relief, right?
yeah.
So it's reward or relief. Now, the thing that annoys me, and I've got to be careful because I don't want to denigrate any other, uh, you know,
Sure.
quit lit writers, um,
Hmm.
but there's a fundamental misunderstanding about alcohol, and this is really important to me, and it makes everyone think that they're mad. I think, and it might be quite controversial. So this is my controversial
Okay.
point, John. Right, and
I
let's
love
bear
it.
with me on this. Right, bear
Okay, I
with
will.
and that is that everyone thinks of alcohol as a depressant because the medical profession have been very vocal over the years and say this is chemically a depressant
Hmm.
because of they look at the brain, say these are the effects on the central nervous system. It seems to be depressed, so it's depressant. Well, it's not. I'm really sorry to shock all your listeners out there who may be thinking, I understand why I get a bit of a kick out of this stuff if it's such a depressant. And I've been having a good time, John. It's been great. So why there all this talk about it being a depressant? Well, actually, the technical term is it's a biphasic stimulant and sedative. So biphasic,
Mm-hmm.
stimulant, sedative, right? Now, what that
Okay.
means is there's a stimulant effect followed by a sedative effect. So there
Makes
is,
sense.
I'm afraid to say, you are going to feel a sense of pleasure when you
Yes.
drink alcohol. You definitely will, and
Right.
we all know that.
Right.
But but if you read most of the quick lit books, like I did for many years, and I think I've read most of them, they all say it's a depressant. It's not, because
Right.
then there wouldn't be any reason. I'm not getting a buzz. I'm not getting a high. You know, it's so let's get that straight.
Okay.
And if you want to, I'm not going to quote the chapter and verse, but you go and look at my book, you see it. It's there. And if you don't believe me, it's there's a whole chapter on it. Um, it's there. So it's a stimulant and sedative. And there's this different phases. So this phase starts. I'm doing this to the camera, so people on the audio are going to go, "What's he doing?"
Oh, yes, that's right.
I'm showing like sort of a rising curve initially. So within the first sort of first hour of drinking, you're going to get this rising stimulant effect. But immediately coming after that, just as it's coming down, the stimulant effect, you're going to have a rising sedative effect.
Mm.
It's automatic. It's a bit like you bounce a ping pong ball on an elastic string with a bat, and the ball comes back. That's exactly the same with alcohol. You're going to get this stimulant effect, but immediately after, you're going to get a sedative effect. You can't have one without the other. And
Absolutely.
there's been studies on rats. There's been studies on humans. There's been studies on the questionnaires with people. There's lots of this is not. There's lots of research on this. They've actually measured the timing of this, and you can see the graph in my book, etc. So my point is, you are getting a pleasure from drinking alcohol. So you're not mad,
Right.
and I hope you
Right.
find that really reassuring.
Yeah.
The problem is you're also getting other adverse effects that are going to follow short term and long term.
Mm.
But your memory is affected, and so your actual, the you never think about the sort of negative effects
Right.
of drinking alcohol. So what I had to do was have a sort of, sort of a bit of a kind of search of the soul, really. Um, and I mean, for me, hitting rock bottom, what was I didn't, I, it was pretty bad. That's why I'm struggling to kind of, um, this was late in the evening of my life, and and things started to happen, and um, it's like the world was falling down around me.
Mhm.
Um, and and I couldn't make sense of it. I just couldn't work. Everything seemed to be going wrong. Everything with my relationship, with my work, um, and I couldn't really make sense because when I look at it with my alcohol head on, I couldn't make sense of why is it a problem to be moving every 2 years in a job? Because you're an international teacher, you can
Uh,
move every 2 years. It's perfectly natural. Actually, that's what I've been doing for 20 years. I've been moving every 2 years.
mhm.
Is that then you start looking at it more closely and saying, hold on a second, I can justify that for career reasons, but is it always that way? So when you start looking back, you start seeing kind of patterns.
Mhm.
And I think the trigger for me was for quitting was I remember writing in my journal, um, uh, you know, my goal this year is to stop drinking.
Oh.
And I I came back to that journal for I don't know what I was looking for. I don't know, some bill I had to pay, and I went back in the journal and I saw that, and I was almost just about to write the same thing because
Wow.
I'd had such a rough night the night before or whatever, and my life seemed impossible to manage. Um, and I saw the note saying you're going to quit, and it was exactly a year later. And I was just thinking, oh,
Wow.
God's sake, Mark, what are you doing?
Mhm.
And it was just like, that was it. So it was like, I know it's a cliche, but it was like, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. And it's too much, and I've got to get help, and I've got to, you know, find a way out of this. Um, I hate myself that much.
Yeah.
Uh,
So how
and
did you get from
that's
that point of being desperate and needing help and getting help in recovery? How'd you get from there to what you're doing now, where you have this incredible um, way of helping people? You know, you've written a book, you've got the what's it called again? I'm sorry, the alcohol, no, the addiction help agency. So how did all this come about?
well, you've got to, first of all, you just that simple question there, John, isn't it?
Yeah, it is a simple
If
question, but I know, but there's a story behind it.
answer the question, maybe I was subconsciously trying to get away from that
Oh
question.
yeah, the
No,
story
but
behind this, the story
the
behind
story
this.
behind it, yeah, the story behind how did I get to kind of recover, really. And first of
I
all,
mean, not everybody
I
who gets into recovery does what you did. Not everybody writes a book, and not everybody starts a therapy organization to help people.
Yeah. Okay. So first of all, on a personal level, it was getting help. So you first of all need to kind of see what where you're at. For some people,
Yeah.
I'd say level one. If they say I need help, they'll start with bibliotherapy. So they start. Okay, I'll get a book. Get my book, but get a book. That's a really good start to kind of read, try and find out as much as you can about what's happening and what you're going through in your head. um, and it's not what you think. You think it's the outside circumstances causing you to drink. That's wrong. Okay, I don't care if you hate me. That the truth is, it's not what's outside you that's the problem. Because I know I've been there. I've been thinking I need a drink so desperately because God, I can't pay this, I can't pay that. They're going to take this from me. They're going to take that. I've got no job. I've got this. I've been there, right? I've been, and I know what that is like. So I'm telling you, you're wrong. So if you think it's because of what's around you that you're drinking, I don't care what it is, if it's trauma or anything, that's nothing to do with that might be another issue that
Hmm.
we can talk about if there is trauma, um, because there is something that can affect it. But what I'm saying to you is the real problem is how you're thinking at the moment, and it's what's going on inside your head, not what
At
other
the
people
moment.
have done to you, and not what is happening to you from other outside sources.
Okay.
So it's in here. That's the first thing. So once I got better, um, then you've kind of there's this crazy thing, John, where you're elated. You absolutely feel crumbs. I've recovered.
Yeah.
And I do say recovered because
Right.
I
You
don't.
do.
I'm a little bit different with the AA here, and I'm going to be controversial again because I don't believe in dead dating. Okay, I think they do this thing with what's her name? Um, if someone's turned into a lady from being a man, then they call it do not mention her
Uh,
previous name because that would
oh.
be dead naming. Okay,
Oh. Okay. I've not heard that
okay.
phrase before, actually.
So
So.
I call it dead dating. I don't want
Okay.
to know how many days it was since you last had a drink, right? I don't give a
Okay.
damn. Okay. I don't care if it's 20 years, 30 years, one day.
Right.
Okay. Right. Because I don't need to remember every day. Oh, the purpose of this day is since I last had a drink, right? The drink is
Right.
behind me. Okay.
Mm.
I'm not interested in it. I am not interested in the slight of how many days it's been because it's just making my day fill up with
Right.
thinking about drinking. I don't want to think about but for many people they've had a few issues with the AA. I think it's a wonderful organization, so don't get me wrong,
Oh.
but I had some issues, and that was one of them. I used the countdown clock thing that you get the app
Mm-hmm.
you get on your
Mm-hmm.
laptop, and I found that really, really
It can put
it
pressure
wasn't
on
helpful.
people. It can put pressure on people, and it's not really. Although abstinence is important, it's not really always the gauge of one's recovery necessarily. You know, if you think about, and this is my opinion, and you might disagree, but if you think about recovery as being a process of change, then one might have a relapse. One might have a little episode where they drink, but it doesn't mean that they can't still progress. And I think that the problem sometimes when you're counting the days is it creates this hierarchy where the people with the large number of days have a recovery that's somehow better than someone who has a
Yeah,
lower number of days. And your recovery shouldn't be measured in the number of days. I think that, and I don't think you shouldn't compare it to anyone else's recovery anyway. But I don't know.
that's
I just seen
exactly.
too many people who feel if they have a relapse that they've failed.
No, that's absolutely right. It was amazing. I've got like a Facebook group. It's a public group called "How to Stop Drinking Alcohol," and someone put on that site. I've had 3.5 years and 3.5 years. Well, I think it was 3.5 years of sobriety. Ask me anything you want, and with a lovely photo, actually, a very
Uh-huh.
handsome man. I must
Uh-huh.
say, I mean, I've got to give him credit there. He looked wonderful, but I just thought, that's not really going to perhaps help the poor lady who's just posted, please,
Right.
I'm desperate for help,
Yes. Right.
and
Mhm.
I think, this is sometimes it's not a competition, is it?
No.
I've got this many years, or I'm better than you for that. And actually, what's quite interesting about relapse, I think you're absolutely right, by the way, is that it's how you interpret it.
Mm.
Is it a slip?
Mhm.
Is it something you can use to inform you, and so you can say, oh,
Mhm.
right, can I learn from that?
Mhm.
Remember that old, if we're getting onto techniques here, but the classic one is, just make sure, get away. If you've had one drink, just get away from the
Right.
situation. Whatever you're doing, just get away. I mean, these are old AA things. I used to go to AA as well,
Mhm.
so I'm very familiar with the program. Um, but yeah, what's my point? The point is, I don't believe in dead dating. I don't care
Gotcha.
how many days it's been. I just
It's
say, look,
right. I agree with
you
that.
focus on being positive. But the positive thing, and I think that's why I'm so happy to be here, and that's what I'm excited about. My message. My message is life is a lot better on the other side. It's not depressing. I'm having a
Mhm.
great time. Like you
Mhm.
said, I've written a book. I've started an agency. You don't have to do that.
Mhm.
But I'm having a fantastic time. I've never been happier. And I honestly mean that.
Yeah.
And you think when you're when you think when you're drinking, this is the highlight. And I mean, I'm not saying I didn't have some highlights, John. I mean, in those days, I mean, I could have been a bit crazy myself. Um, but it's not what I call kind of genuine happiness.
Yeah.
It's not really about really feeling happy, um, about who I am, if you like,
Mhm.
without kind of trying to get spiritual about it. And one of the important things about the book, and another thing I'm a big fan of your show for here, John, is that it's not religious based.
Right.
So you're actually, and I think this is really important, and I've tried really hard in the book that I don't adopt. You have to have a belief in a higher power,
Right.
and I think one part of my methodology is that's a big word, isn't it? Part of my method is actually it is developing meditation,
Yes.
but I don't do that from a religious point of view.
Right.
And in fact, there's a fantastic book about something called the relaxation response,
Mm.
which is a secular way of meditating,
Mm.
and from a kind of scientific basis, and it's from the 60s. And I thought that was fascinating that someone had come across a way of doing it that wasn't Buddhist.
Right.
Um,
Right. Right.
because everyone thinks, oh goodness me, I'm going to be chanting next. I mean, I chant, by the way, and
Right. Uh-huh.
I'm really into that kind of stuff as well. But
Right.
in my book, I'm not. In
Right.
my book, I'm very balanced about, look, this is a secular way of doing it,
Yeah.
and you
I
don't
like
have
that
to have a
because
belief.
it opens it up to everybody, whether you're religious or not. It should be a side issue. Like if I, and I can speak the language of the person who is spiritual and the person who only wants a practical solution, but it's best just to be able to meet someone where they are. So I totally respect somebody who wants to incorporate, their religious beliefs or their spirituality into their recovery. But if you're going to communicate to, a broad segment of people, then you want to use language that we all can understand, I think. And sometimes the language of recovery can be, oh, it can seem somewhat mysterious and out of reach for someone who doesn't have that spiritual connection. So that's just my
Absolutely.
thing.
Well,
That's my thing.
well, no, absolutely. But that's why why I base my book on cognitive behavioral therapy,
Yeah.
because it's not it's not, we're not talking about Jungian therapy or
Mm-mm.
psychoanalysis or humanistic or integrative, which could take many, many years.
No.
We're talking about a process that can be achieved in 10 to 12 weeks.
Yeah.
And
It's
so
very
this brings
practical
me
stuff.
on, yeah, this, because it's focusing on changing behavior, and it's very kind of objective based. So this is what brings me onto the agency. um,
Mm.
so during lockdown I founded the Addiction Help Agency,
As
which is
during this then. Oh, how about that? I didn't know it's so recent.
yeah, it's very recent.
Okay.
So it's only been going a year, but it's basically addiction help agency. That's the web, but
Right.
an online CBT course basically for 10 to 12 weeks.
Okay.
um, and basically it's alcohol cessation. So
Right.
it's not do you want to drink or why it's about I want to quit. I've
Yeah.
decided, that's it. And that's the only thing we do. We don't do sort of one-to-one counseling and
Mm.
endless debate for
Mm-hmm.
years and many years. We're not
Mm-hmm.
into that. What we're
Mm-hmm.
into is saying, right, what are the issues? What are the things, that challenges that are confronting you right now?
Mm-hmm.
What are the ways you're thinking? Are you having any of these negative automatic thoughts? I've got a way of memorizing the different types. And then are they indicative of intermediate beliefs, which are like intermediate rules you have for doing things?
Mm.
And what would they be based on? They'd be based on core beliefs. So there's different techniques you can use, and they're in the book, that you can use to kind of drill down to find out what is the cause of the negative automatic thoughts you might be having. What are they symptomatic of? And then going a layer down, like a bit like an onion, going a layer down in the onion and saying, does that relate to any rules I have for dealing with life that are very, that in this situation I do that, in this situation I do that, and then what are they symptomatic of in terms of underlying core beliefs, which could be to do with your views of yourself, your views of others, and your views of the world. So this is what we're trying to do, is to try and look at what is behind your thinking.
Yeah.
So you're doing
Mm-hmm.
something that to you is totally rational and makes total sense. And I'm going to say to you, do you think that makes total sense?
Yeah.
Because it doesn't make total sense to me. And
Well, I
let's,
tell you, I really
yeah,
like your approach, and I think that the book, and I'm sorry I haven't read the entire thing, but the first three chapters were really really well written, and it's not a dry it's not a dry read where you're just confronted with a lot of science and data, although you get a lot of science and data. But it's really told in a story. It's told like you introduce this character who is about 6 years older than me, I mean 6 years younger than me, and you talk about the times where he grew up and the influences of alcohol and how he learned about it. And anyways, it's kind of interesting how you kind of take like a little mystery. You're trying to figure out, why is this person poisoning himself? Why is this person poisoning himself with alcohol? But you do it, you really write in a very entertaining, engaging way that really draws someone in to want to read the next page in the next chapter. So that is really valuable for a book that's really designed to help people understand the science of what's going on with them, why they're addicted to alcohol.
oh, thank you so
So
much, John. That's so kind of you to say that. It's a blinking long book. but, but it's it really is. I'm trying to come from a good, well, hopefully coming from a good place, and
yeah,
it is there to try and help. And I try to make it. I thought if I just put the facts, cold facts, who's going to read it?
yeah,
And I wouldn't read it. So it's trying to write the book that I would have read, um, with a bit of an angle. The mystery you refer it. That's really nice how you
yeah.
refer it. That because my name's Mark Holmes, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when I was at school, everyone was calling me Sherlock.
Right.
So so I thought, well, actually, I can use that. I can
Yeah.
actually be proud of that. Let's make it a mystery. Why
Yeah.
would someone drink themselves to death? Let's
Right.
make it a Sherlock Holmes investigation, and follow them through their trials and tribulations,
Mm.
and keeping a kind of objective viewpoint
Yeah.
wherever possible.
I think I might like to have you back on again sometime. I'm gonna get your book and read it, and I know there's a lot more information in there that could probably make for some more interesting conversations. So definitely want to keep in touch with you. You should do something with your YouTube
Okay.
channel too. Get on YouTube, make some videos, get out there and do something with that too. I love YouTube. There's quite a recovery community on YouTube and a lot of good resources and information out there. So I'm kind of a big YouTube fan. So
I do. Oh, yeah.
anyway,
I'd love to come back, and that's very kind of you. And yeah, it's been a great pleasure talking to you, John. And
yeah,
I wish everyone good luck in their recovery. And
absolutely.
yeah, thank you.
And you can find Mark at his website, addictionhelp.agency, or contact him at hello@addictionhelp.agency. But I just go to the website, addictionhelp.agency, and you can find all the information about the book, about the therapy that's available there, and I think it's great. So I feel comfortable recommending that you check it out. So with that, I'm going to say that is another episode of Beyond Belief Sobriety. Thank you so much for being with us. If you would like to help out our podcast, you can do that in a couple of different ways. You can go over to patreon.com/Beyond Belief Sobriety and become a patron. You can join our YouTube channel for small, monthly donations. You can go to our website, beyondbeliefsobriety.com, and click on the donate button or buy us a cup of coffee. And if you can't do any of that, that's totally okay. We could use the help. But again, we're going to keep doing this podcast because we love doing it and we love speaking with people like Mark. So thank you very much. And thanks again, Mark. I really appreciate it. It was so great talking with you.
Cheers. Thanks, John. Brilliant. Thank you,
Cheers.
mate.
Yes.
Bye.